So, you know, Chrissy's point was a really good point, because I mean, we can see we've got these things in our mind, you know. We see, we're not foolish, we see our minds, we can see the anger, we can see the hurt, but the thing is we don't know how to analyze it. I mean, Chrissy's, she's like all of us, you know, she's a good Buddhist, she's doing her best to know her mind, but it's just sort of that next point. And even if we study the mind, sometimes it's still not difficult because we get so caught up in it, you know. So with Chrissy, which is the point we should, the first level of development, the first level of practice is at least zip the lip. This is the most powerful. I mean, you can look at the world and look at the way people harm each other. So what harms is the body and speech, isn't it? But of course it comes from the mind. So we can see how hard it is to control the mind when our body and speech is so berserk. When we're in the midst of family and intense relationships, and we're all caught up and we're not noticing our minds, before we know it, the words are vomiting out the mouth. Before we know it, we're hitting each other. I mean, most of us might not go around physically hurting people, but look at our speech. And the reason is because we're not familiar with our mind, because we don't have techniques. And then also in our system, I say this, I think it's true in our culture, you only go to the therapist when you've got really serious emotional problems. I mean, if Chrissy went to the therapist seriously and said that she got annoyed, they literally would laugh at her. Do you understand? Because we only, and I say this is sort of like, sounds like a joke, but it's deadly serious. We don't have maintenance for our mind. We maintain our teeth, our body, our house, our car. Wheels just don't fall off on the motorway because we go to the mechanic as soon as we hear the wobble. But we notice that that's a wobble. But we think, oh, that's nothing, it's just normal, until you want to scream. Then we think, and then we have guilt and shame and then blame, and then we think we might go to the therapist. It's going to the mechanic after the wheel's off, you know, it's a bit late. This is why all Buddha's giving us, it's not as if he invented this, but it's his expertise. Simple, I mean, methods. This is why simple practices like watching your boring old breath, spending 5 minutes making the effort. And what you're doing really is making the effort not to follow the thoughts. That's why you anchor your mind to the breath. Nothing holy about the breath. It needs something to hold on to so that we don't follow every crazy thought, which is the default norm of all beings on the planet. So it's incredible, just that, beginning to make the effort to hold on to that breath instead of launching into the thoughts, because they're so compelling, you know. And they are thoughts at that point. When the body shakes and the words are coming out, that's when they're emotional. And our tragedy is we don't notice those thoughts. They're thoughts that Chrissy was experiencing. They were thoughts. We don't think of them as thoughts. That's what's surprising. We feel the pain. She said frustration. It's a polite word for mild anger. In other words, anger saying, how dare he do that? That's what it's saying. A person's doing or saying something that doesn't suit us. And see, what's interesting here too, even, oh, thank you, yeah. What's even interesting here is it might be terrible what they're doing. So we say, oh, well, anger is justified. But no, not even then. That's called observing reality. The person's gone crazy. But anger just makes a mess of it. But we assume you have no choice but to be angry. No. In other words, and this is a massive one. This is another huge one. When you give up, when you're trying to work with that anger, like Chrissy's example, get frustrated, we're thinking we have to give up having any opinion at all about what the other person is doing. They might be terrible what they just did. So giving up anger, we think is giving up caring or giving up any analysis. No, if you know, you see the person kicking the dog because the guy's out of control or the kid's screaming or something, they're doing that. They're kicking the dog, and that's not cool. But we assume the only choice we've got is anger. So if you give up being angry with the kid, then you're going, oh, well, it's okay, kick the dog. No, that's nihilism. So there's a difference between recognizing what's happening, my kid is kicking the dog, and having enough wisdom to know that's not a cool thing to do for the dog or the kid. That's wisdom. That's not anger. That's intelligence. But anger on top makes a big mess. So all this type of thing we have to understand, but we don't look carefully enough. For example, you stubbed your toe and you get angry. Well, of course I'm angry. I just stubbed my toe. What do you think? No, they're two separate events, you know. This type of awareness, but this type of awareness, like Chrissy said, she observes it, she notices. That's the first step. But you've got to imbue that noticing with an intelligent analysis of what's going on. So that's to know, that's how you know what to do with it. So there's different things I'm saying right here. Buddha's saying we have these distorted, emotional, I-based, you know, as you said, ego, I-based. Necessarily they are I-based. And instead of feeling bad about ourselves, we should feel sorry for ourselves because they're really fragile. Now, you know, we're very fragile. We get upset easily. So what gets upset is attachment. And attachment is this primordial neediness to have everything to be lovely. It's the simplest way to put it. It's a primordial kind of emotional hunger, quite sensitive, quite fragile, like a little child that can only cope with everything going the way I want. Which is less attachment, really. Attachment is not like a good quality. Buddha uses it in this particular way. It's not like referring to being good to people and bonding with your children. That's great. It's called love. Attachment is a default, the deepest one. Anger is a response when it doesn't do what it wants. And then the other all come on top of that, you know, the jealousy, all the other dramas we know about. So we need to have an analysis. And this is the thing, when you study Buddha's view of the mind in depth, it's a really quite refined analysis of all these different states of mind. Each has got their own story. That's why you have to listen carefully enough to what, as she said, called it frustration, but what's it saying? What do you think frustration was saying? Put it in words. If you wrote down what frustration is saying. You see what I'm saying? Frustration means what? Do you think? Just say it. Any words? That's right. Well, no, it's got, how dare they do that? I mean, annoyance and frustration are just polite anger. Anger's strong, and we'd shout it. How dare you do that? Stop doing that. I wish you wouldn't do that. Isn't that anger? So frustration, you maybe say it, don't say it. But it's basically they're doing something that you don't want. That's what anger is. That's my point. And what I don't want, what I want means attachment. It's an emotional, needy. It's kind of neurotic. It's not comfortable. And it can't cope with anything going wrong. That's why we get frustrated at the tiniest thing. Do you understand? This shows how fragile we are. This is called samsara. Buddha calls that samsara. That's what he means by attachment. Always wanting what I want. And then the more fierce the attachment is and the more powerful the anger, the more harm you do. Of course, to get what you want. That's how it is. I mean, it sort of seems embarrassing to talk about it this way. But then it gets tricky, like I'm saying, when you see, your kid, let's say your kid, out of control, kicking the dog. So of course you have compassion for the dog. And indeed, you should have compassion for your kid as well. And you should have compassion for your kid that you don't want the kid to be out of control for their sake. So the point is we assume there's no choice but to be angry. And then if we give up anger, you do nothing. That's passive. That's absurd. Anger is on top of an intelligent assessment. Oh, look at that. My child is kicking a dog. And then ethics, you know it. So it's not cool to kick a dog for him or the kid, the dog. So then that's intelligence. That's not anger. That's intelligence. Then anger on top is freaking out, So you have to calm that piece down, not throw the baby out with the bathwater. So that's why in daily practice, you stub your toe. The coffee's not hot enough. Little baby things go wrong. The red light, things that attachment doesn't want. One is the event called a red light, and the other is my response to it. But we are so caught up in assuming that automatically you get upset, automatically you get angry, automatically, as if we don't have a choice. This is the kind of thing we need to do to practice, stepping out and being aware of what on earth is going on in here, and then having ability to be in charge of it, They say, don't they? This is a nice saying in Buddhism, that if you can change something, please change it. But what if you can't? And many times we can see you just can't. That's the beginning of practice. This is baby level. Start at the baby level. Don't wait until the bad things, really serious things happen. But this is the thing about the Buddhist analysis of these, as we call it, emotions or feelings. They're all rooted in being conceptual thoughts. But because we practice having them for so long, we just only notice them when the emotion is there, when the feeling is there, when the body's involved. when the body is involved, when you're shaking. You can hear the shouting in your head, you know. They're concepts, people. It's a concept. And aversion is over-exaggerating that event. And then attachment, which wants everything to be lovely, you know, is attached. And also, attachment is multifaceted, as I always say. It functions in many ways. And we see aversion, it's a response when this idea, you know, looking forward to the chocolate cake. You built up the story. It's exaggerating the deliciousness of the chocolate cake. You're expecting the chocolate cake. You manipulate to get the chocolate cake. You can't wait for the chocolate cake, and then carrot cake comes. Oh, I ordered chocolate cake, you know. So attachment wanting something more, wanting what I want, but also exaggerating the benefit of the deliciousness of the chocolate cake. These are all conceptual states of mind. And the more we look into it, the more we study it and understand this particular way. It's not Jung, it's not Freud. You can study who you like. This is very specific. And this is coming from like 2,500 years ago. I mean, we really thought we invented psychology. It's a bit rude. More and more subtle awareness, more and more precise, more and more clear. All the raging conceptual thoughts in there. More and more understanding and analysis to be able to deconstruct them and then change them. That's the point. So, okay, the Buddhist view, and I was talking about this, that finally these delusions, all these neuroses, these emotional afflictions, whatever words you like, they all eventually, using these techniques that Buddha is describing, can be utterly eradicated from our mind. So that sounds kind of shocking to us because we so assume they're normal parts of a normal person. So normal that you'd be abnormal if you didn't have them. That's how deeply we assume they're regular parts of a regular person. Buddha's analysis is quite dramatic, really. And this is the point. Why they can be eradicated from our mind is because they're distorted assessments of the thing, the person, the event. So with practice every day, like Chrissy said, she notices, she observes it. And she does use one argument against it. Well, I'm seeing him as a permanent person. That's just one thing. But you argue directly with what anger is saying, what frustration is saying. How dare he do that? And then what that's come from is the one underneath it, attachment. I want it like this. It's an assumption, very subtle, very subtle. So they're all distorted concepts. They're all exaggerations. They embellish reality. They embellish, as Lama Zopa says, all these delusions decorate on top of what is there, layers upon layers of characteristics that aren't there. So in that sense, the day-to-day job of trying to be, using Buddha's view of the world. First, you control your body and speech, the servants of the mind. Then you start to control the mind, which doesn't mean suppressing, but being aware of it, like Chrissy said, and then having an analysis so that you can argue with those concepts. And eventually you lessen them and they won't bubble up, as Chrissy said. And when you've really done this work, ever more subtle, till eventually you've removed the subtlest misconception in the mind that underpins even attachment, which is this ego grasping, the subtlest delusion, the subtlest misconception, the subtlest emotional affliction, so subtle that we just can't even hear it, which is a wrong view of the very nature of oneself as something absolute, concrete, solid, separate, set in stone. Attachment is its main voice. And then anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. So finally, when you've uprooted the root one, which is the realization of emptiness, then they have gone like a puff of smoke. I'll use a simple example. It sounds a bit odd maybe initially, but it's a very simple example. If when you take the view that these delusions, as Buddha calls them, these emotional fictions, are misconceptions at their bare bones. Anger is an embellishment, seeing more the ugly qualities of that person because they're doing what I don't want them to do. So they appear through the lenses of my anger as awful. When they're doing what I'm doing, when the boyfriend is divine to me, I've got my attachment glasses on, so it's getting what it wants, and so he looks divine to me. We know this. So all delusions exaggerate, embellish, decorate, as Lama Yeshe says, on top of what is there, layers upon layers of characteristics that aren't there. So attachment for the chocolate cake makes the chocolate cake look way more divine, delicious than it actually is. And the fact is, we know that because look at what's left of the chocolate cake after you've eaten 5 pieces. It will now look repulsive because your attachment has gone, and aversion is taking its place. Aversion is the bare bones conceptual thought beneath anger. Annoyed, irritated, frustrated, upset. So each delusion exaggerates certain components. So anger exaggerates the ugliness of the person, Attachment exaggerates the deliciousness of the person. Let's say you've got arrogance. Arrogance exaggerates your important qualities. Let's say you've got low self-esteem. Low self-esteem exaggerates your bad qualities. They all got their own distorted story. Underneath the emotional component is this conceptual thought that's there. We don't notice it because we're only familiar with the feeling. So we've got to dig deep. They're all exaggerations. They're all inaccurate. They're all misconceptions. So, simple example. If you think that 1 + 1 is 2, is 3, let's say, you're learning math. You think it's 3. Then straight away, you'll say to me, Robina, that's wrong. Come on, it's 2. And I'll go, oh, I remember, I'm sorry, I just made a mistake. So just listen carefully. As a simple example about facts, 1 + 1, we know, according to the law of maths, is 2. We've all accepted that. That's a truth, a relative truth that we've accepted. So if I say it's 3, then I made a mistake. That's a misconception. 1 + 1 is 2 is a valid conception. 1 + 1 is 3 is an invalid conception. We agree upon that. So I thought for a moment the wrong concept. I had it in my head, didn't I? So you fixed me up and I agreed with you because I realized it was wrong. So then the moment I say, you're right, 1 + 1 is 2. So this is the point. What happened to the previous thought? It's a simple question and a simple answer. What happened to the previous thought that was in my mind was that I heard the right answer and I understood it. You didn't squash it down my throat. I bought into it. I recognized the truth of it and I accepted the truth of it. 1 + 1 is 2. So that seeing of the truth is what drives out the lie. So that no longer existed in my mind. So 1 + 1 is 3 is a concept, but it can be removed from the mind because it's not a valid concept. This is how Buddha's talking about reality. Things he's talking about. He says things exist a certain way, and he's observing this is how they exist. Things are impermanent, not permanent. Things have no intrinsic nature, not having an intrinsic nature. Things don't have intrinsic deliciousness or ugliness. They're all projections by our mind. This is how he's talking. So when you finally removed all these delusions from your mind, you're seeing nakedly how things exist. This is how things are. Impermanent, you know. You see sentient beings' minds, so there's no longer suffering. So delusions can be removed from the mind because they're misconceptions. And what makes them go, what makes, when Chrissy's looking at the piano and plays a wrong note, what makes her stop playing the wrong note is playing the right note. So Chrissy said, I saw the anger, then I just watched it, but I didn't know what to do. It was a valid question. I saw that I played the wrong note, but I didn't know what to do. And then it will keep happening until you know what to do. So you have to understand intellectually the wrong note, and then you look at Bach's music, which is pretty easy, and you'll see the right note. So you'll play the right note, and next time you catch it, and you play the right note again, and next time you catch it, you play the right note again, and soon you'll have perfected the right notes, and the wrong notes have all gone because you've trained your mind in the right notes. It's just the analogy for virtue. Virtue is the right notes. Virtue and wisdom are the right notes. That's reality. And the delusions are the wrong notes. So you keep practicing the right ones. So just to leave it there is not enough. The next one is you have to argue with it. That means you have to understand it's a concept. So you argue with it using validity. One thing you could say with anger is, you know, well, first of all, I'm being annoyed now because he's not doing what my attachment wants. That's a good analogy. A good analysis is perfect. And then to calm it down, you say, well, you know, you can say, well, think of him. He's just trying to, he's just, you know, he's just doing what he thinks is okay. Give the man a break. He's all right. Be kind to him. That's an antidote. That's a powerful antidote. If it's the kid kicking the dog, not anger with him, but compassion. Because by him kicking the dog, he's putting a terrible karmic imprint in his mind and he's harming the dog. So you have a compassionate approach to it. That'll stop the anger. There's a multitude of ways to argue. We have to hear the conceptual thoughts in the head beneath the emotional component and argue with them. One step at a time. Be your own therapist, as Lama Yeshe said. Think it through. This is the Buddha's analysis. It's very specific, very precise. And there's so many conceptual stories in our head, you know, so many delusions. So for example, there's one delusion that, you know, attachment has a very subtle level of working, and a really subtle attachment, a really subtle one is attachment to being seen as a nice girl. It's much subtler than for sex and drugs and rock and roll. It's different from getting what I want. Attachment is multifaceted. One way of saying broadly what it is attachment to get what I want. Another way to say it is attachment to comfort. Another way to say it is a big one. Another one, a particular one, is attachment to being seen as a good girl. In other words, being approved of. In other words, being liked. This is a major one that drives most of our decisions because we all assume that we're not good enough on our own. The irony of attachment is it's a symptom of a very unhappy person. It's a symptom of being a half a person who thinks I'm nothing, who thinks I'm nobody. Attachment is a symptom of a lot of just nothing. I'm a nothing person. We all have it. So either attached to food to fill up the gaping hole, attached to sex to fill up the gaping hole, attached to beauty and clothing to fill up the gaping hole, attached to another broad one is attachment to get what I want. More broad, you know. More broad one is attachment to just being in my comfort zone. But this one is attachment to being seen as a good girl. It's very primordial. So there's another delusion in there called pride. And that's very specifically over-exaggerating my importance. So they sound very similar in our head. We have to locate each one precisely. These are all conceptual thoughts in our mind that we are totally programmed with. That's why we can't hear them as thoughts. That's why we feel them as emotions, because we've been practicing thinking them for countless lifetimes, Buddha says. Not just learning in this life. They're totally programmed. So we have to listen carefully and go ever more deep and unpack and hear all these thousands of little roommates in our head, all doing their own thinking, you know, the jealous roommate, the attached roommate, the angry roommate, the low self-esteem roommate, the arrogant roommate. I mean, there's so many variations of all of these, and they're all conceptual thoughts. We have to hear them and argue with them and then reconfigure our mind. Buddha's a cognitive behavioral therapist, the best you'll find. They sound all jumbled together like a big soup. Can't tell one bit from another. And as all the Lamas say in the text, we have to learn to distinguish between the virtues, the positive roommates, the positive thoughts, the positive ones, the valid ones, and these unhappy ones. Because the unhappy ones cause us pain, cause us to misconceive the world, and cause us to harm others. The virtuous ones cause us to be happy, cause us to connect with others, and be beneficial to others. So why don't we just sit as we are, sit up straight. We'll go through the position of the body, and we'll do a little practice of concentrating on our mind. So there's various points of the body that all the great yogis and yoginis of the past have found to be most conducive, to good meditation. Because the body doesn't meditate, but it's good to have it in a good position. So the first one, ideal one, all the great yogis have found that being in the full lotus position is the best. Because if the great yogis meditating for months on end, sometimes at the subtle level, they're totally stable. The body's totally stable when it's like that. And all the subtler physical and mental energies can flow smoothly. But of course, if you can't do that, Dalai Lama says if you can start your session that way, that would be very wonderful. If not, sit regular cross-legged or one leg on the other side, or whatever you can. If not cross-legged, then sit in a chair like some of us. That's the first point. The second one is your bottom. If you are sitting on the cushion, if you're sitting cross, ideally you've got very flexible legs, you can sit full lotus. Then you have a cushion just under your coccyx, kind of propping you up slightly. That can be helpful. Sort of thrusting your body slightly forward. Or you just adjust what cushion you can get, what's best for you. And the next one would be if you're sitting in a chair, don't slump into the back of the chair. That's important. You should hold up your own body. So just sit forward and then have your feet firmly on the ground, as comfortable as you can, okay? But you hold yourself up. That's important. Because if you're sitting cross-legged, that's what you're doing, holding yourself up. Otherwise, you slump and then you go to sleep. The third one, they talk about your shoulders being square, but the body relaxed. So I would add to that, all your muscles, we tend to tense. If we're sitting up straight, we tense the muscles. So sit up straight, but relax the muscles. Like your bones are upright, but relax the muscles. Shoulders upright, but relaxed. Your hands in the meditation gesture or mudra. So there's many, you can get what you want, but in the end, this is the one we often learn first. Left underneath, right on top, like this, thumbs touching. So that's your bottom, your legs, your back, shoulders, hands. Now the head, various points. Have your head slightly tilted forward. No, first of all, your jaw relaxed. Lips slightly apart. And then tip of the tongue resting behind the palate, top teeth. The yogis have found that having the tongue there when you meditate seriously for a long time prevents you from having to dribble or swallow the spit, apparently. Then your eyes looking down. All the yogis who are serious meditators who've got good concentration, if they're meditating in the day, they have their eyes open, so the light comes in, keeps their mind sharp. Keeps their mind sharp. If they're not, but if they're very subtle, it won't matter. But if, but maybe we get distracted. So have your eyes lightly closed. With your eyes looking down beneath your eyelids, as if you're looking along your nose towards the ground. So settle into this position now, and then forget about it. And just let's now do something with our mind. So what we're going to focus on isn't the breath, okay? And it's quite subtle. It seems a bit curious in the beginning, but just relax. We're going to focus on the mind. But even the Lama would say we're going to focus on the clarity of the mind. But that's when your mind's quite settled. And so let's assume it's not. So what we're going to start with is whatever pops up in your mind. You don't force it. You don't think something consciously. You just sit there with your attention. Imagine your attention and your mindfulness are all doing their job. And you're going to pay attention each moment to whatever's there. You don't have a conversation. You don't get upset about it. You don't wish the thoughts would go away. You stay paying attention to whatever pops up in your mind. That's the job. And every time you feel yourself, the attention wandering, your mindfulness brings it back, brings it back. You just pay attention. So the aim in this meditation, I'll say a bit more, this is typical concentration meditation talk, is the two dangers will be your mind gets agitated and excited and you can't stop thinking and you get lost, or you space out. So you're going to be watching both of those like a hawk. You sort of quietly, all these bits and pieces of your mind, like your attention, your discrimination, your different bits are doing their jobs to keep watching the mind, staying stable and steady, not spacing out, not agitated. So you're doing your best and you adjust, you're adjusting. So just watch the thoughts. 2 or 3 minutes, that's it. Good quality minutes. Just watch the thoughts. Bring your mind back. Stay steady. Don't sink into the thoughts. Don't engage in the thoughts. Just pay attention. Okay, relax. A couple of minutes is sometimes better quality than spacing out for 7 minutes. Do good quality 3 minutes. So that's the first part of the meditation, is focusing on the mind. And eventually, as Lama says, eventually it becomes, when the mind gets much more subtle, much more calm, more quiet, less conceptual, they call that the clarity of your mind. It's quite subtle. And that's the conventional nature. We haven't looked at emptiness yet. That hasn't come yet. Are there any questions? Nothing. It's hard to find the object, don't you think? Did you find it hard to notice what you're looking at? Isn't it? It's weird. I feel like you're swimming, sort of like the breath is easy. You can sort of see it, you know. But this is very strange. It's a very odd experience. I agree. Yeah. But that's the thing that is what it brings. What it brings, even just watching the breath brings, this is the miracle of the first step of what we have to do, which is what Chrissy said. You observe it, you notice it. When we know ourselves from our lives or other people, not being rude about them, when we're so caught up in our emotions and feelings, there's no awareness at all. There's no ownership of it. There's no accountability. There's only blame, either defending yourself or blaming others. There's no owning of it, just seeing it, just observing it. This is already an incredible first step. And this is what's interesting with all the mindfulness techniques. Very often, I think, what I hear is you just observe what Chrissy said. But it's only a first step. To think that's the point is a bit nihilistic. It's a bit like saying, I'm going to observe my garden. And you get really good mindfulness of your garden. And you can even replicate an entire garden in a drawing. Hear this, I observe it. But what good is that when you don't even know how to define what's there and therefore to know what to do with it? Because what you just said, I don't know what to do with it. So in other words, you've observed your garden, but you sort of vaguely know as a weed and a herb, but you don't know what to do next. Then that's paralysis. Of course they're going to keep growing. Of course they're going to keep popping up because you have to do something about it. And of course you have to first define what a weed is and know it's not a herb. So you don't go running around pulling out all the herbs instead of the weeds. Don't understand? Then you can do your gardening. So you've got to have focusing, ability to be mindful and pay attention, mixed with intelligence that knows how to define what's there and to know what to do with it. That's the job. That's insight. That's the insight method of doing analysis, but on the run. You understand? Do you understand, Christine? And that's also difficult because our mind's a big mess. It's a big soup. We know that. We don't know how to define what we feel. We don't even know what it is half the time. We can't even tell. Is it jealousy? Is it anger? Is it depression? Is it self-hate? Is it other hate? Is it resentment? Is it arrogance? Is it low self-esteem? I mean, that's a half a dozen. We get the big jumble in there, a big soup, and we can't tell the bits from another. But we have to. We have to. And we're all variations, you know. I mean, think of it. Some person could have incredible attachment to their own needs, but it's all about just eating food. But they're very kind and generous. There's no contradiction. Another person, their attachment is really fierce to make money, and then they've also got arrogance. So that person with attachment to money and attachment to food, similar attachment, but one's got arrogance and one's got humility. So they're very different people. So they're all different recipes. You understand? It's not just the same attachment. They're all affected by each other. So we have to know our own personality well. Do you understand my point? Because if you've got, and then if you've got anger, if there's a person's got a strong anger, all the time complaining and criticizing other people, you guarantee you've got arrogance. Arrogance and anger. I remember Atisha said, the best patience is humility. And he might have said the other way around, but it works. So I can see myself, I'm very volatile and in my life, angry and arrogant. Because when you're angry, of course you're arrogant. Who does that person think they are? How dare you do that to me? Arrogant and anger are like twins, So it's embarrassing to admit it because we never think we're arrogant. Another thing that's fascinating with our mind, we all confess to low self-esteem, definite. But do you know what? This is embarrassing. Low self-esteem is the flip side of arrogance and pride. This is really hard to see, but when we do, it's again a revelation. Because I think in our culture, we suffer so tremendously in the modern West. And I think the main delusion is pride. You know, we're born in a world. I mean, this is the thing about that. We're born where we're considered, like, you know, we're in the top, we're the top dogs, you know. You're born as, like we talk about, you know, no, I mean, we can see if you're in a society and you've got a really good job and you're in our culture, let's say you'd be white, I mean, boy, maybe a girl too, white, but with all these labels we have, and there's very subtle kind of power structure there. We all know that. And if you're in the piece that's the best, you can't help but be arrogant, you know. I'm the top, you know. Do you understand? So when you're in the low one, actually low self-esteem is how dare they be better than me. It's actually pride. It's very embarrassing to see this, but if you see it, it's profound. Because if you're humble, a humble person does not have low self-esteem. A humble person is content with who they are. They're not all the time comparing themselves. We've got low self-esteem and we're comparing other people who are better than us, and how dare they be better. That's pride. Can you hear me? Can you hear that? We should be blushing with embarrassment. That's a shock to us because we all have got that low self-esteem. And I'm not saying it's not suffering. It's terrible suffering. To think you're awful. To have low self-esteem is one of our worst sufferings on the planet. How we loathe ourselves. It's so shocking. Dalai Lama said he was shocked at the extent of low self-esteem in the West. You know? Self-hate. But it's comparing with others. That's what it is. How dare they be better than me? That's what it is. Instead of, if you have karma, rejoicing. Due to their virtue, they're born in a position where they're seen as good, you know. We have to understand karma. It's profound practice. So humility isn't low self-esteem, and arrogance isn't self-confidence. If you've got humility, you've got self-confidence. Self-confidence comes with humility. You're content with who you are. You feel more fulfilled, but you're not. But if you've got pride, and we all have, that's why we suffer so terribly. Always seeing people insulting us, offending us, hurting us, always comparing ourselves with others. It's very painful suffering, you know. It's very painful. So we need to see this and hear the thoughts in our mind. They're all our roommates, these thousands of roommates all running around shouting. We've got to listen to each one, identify each one. This is the job of being a Buddhist. And they're why we suffer. And we suffer in a very particular way. So if you've got pride as your main delusion, you know, you suffer always in terms of how you're seen by others, feeling injured, feeling offended, feeling pain, feeling hurt. And it comes very strongly with anger. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a loud, bossy person. It can be a very quiet person. Absolutely. A humble person is a person who genuinely delights in other people's qualities so they don't suffer in that way. It's huge difference, huge difference. When people are humble and patient, that, I think those two are the miracle qualities that enable that person to be happy and fulfilled. It's pride and anger that cause our terrible, terrible pain. Because we cause ourselves suffering doesn't mean it's not suffering. They are terrible suffering. The pain of them are terrible. So that means the more we hear the concept, like say, you know, Chrissy, frustration, that's mild anger. So when you're hearing what it's saying, how dare you do that? I don't like that. So what's the opposite? The opposite to that would be patient. So patient is another approach, Chrissy. A small example is a good one because we start. But patience, which we think is like passive aggression, is not. Patience is a brave attitude that notices the problem, that, you know, like I'm going to use a simple example of your hubby slurping his coffee. And I think I told you this, but I read it somewhere that, yeah, no, maybe not you guys, that these types of noises are the thing that people want to kill each other for, especially like slurping coffee or snoring or very personal sounds, usually out the mouth, I think. It makes people completely berserk. Do you understand? So patience then isn't like brushing my teeth, hoping they'll go away. That's not patience. Patience is not because aversion is resistance. Attachment is always running towards what I want. And then as soon as we meet what we don't want, we kind of resist. We push it back. You understand? So that's what a frustration is. Like you're blocked, you know. So welcome it. Open your eyes to it. See it. And already you do that, it dissipates it. Even that, just that alone, you welcome it. You welcome the problem. Do you understand? That's another approach. Do you hear that one? Do you hear that one, Chrissy? That's immediate. There's no analysis there. Just greet it. Yeah. Then it's go, he's allowed to slurp his coffee. It's okay, Robina. Yeah. And the antidote to pride, which is so painful. It's like a person's like stabbing us with their beauty or their being better or their words, is to be happy for them. To be happy for them, to rejoice. They have a lovely way to put it among the Tibetans. They say, when you're feeling proud, kind of all puffed, self-important, and it's very, very hard to see it, by the way. It's not self-confidence. You see, the key factor, I'm going to finish the Tibetan saying in a minute, but we've got to recognize the feeling. The deluded ones are kind of like feel unhappy. The virtuous ones, which we can mistake them for, feel comfortable. So self-confidence is comfortable. Arrogance is not comfortable. Humility is comfortable. Low self-esteem is not comfortable. You have to see the difference, feel the difference, be aware. So what I'm going to say, if you're feeling low self-esteem, you're a bit sort of squashed, put down, being down, feeling down about yourself. The antidote is to tell yourself something good about yourself. Lift yourself up. If you're feeling arrogant, tell yourself something you can do. If you're arrogant, tell yourself something you can't do. So I know for me, when I feel arrogant, I can't speak any language except Australian. And when I'm around Tibetans and I go to Courtin, those monks have just picked up English, Nepali, Tibetan, just picked it up, And I've been going there for 45 years and still can't speak a single word of Nepali or Tibetan. So if I'm feeling arrogant, all I've got to tell myself is I can't speak any of those languages, and I'm immediately quiet. Do you understand? My lazy Australian mouse. Got to catch all these thoughts, See, what's fascinating about this approach, have you noticed? This is the approach of Buddhist psychology. You're not discussing what other people do to you. You're not discussing what your mummy did and what your daddy did and what your boyfriend did and what your sister did. You're not discussing the external event. You're discussing your own mind. This is what is incredible. You're cutting to the chase. For sure, my boyfriend was horrible. That's him. That's his problem. Now what's mine? So it's incredibly direct psychology. It's like mind-bogglingly direct. You go straight to what's in here because that's the only one you can fix. It's direct. It's incredible, I tell you. Because we can hear the central player in our head is I. That's it. This is how it is. Everything's in reference to I. People not seeing you properly. People not hearing you properly. People not giving what I want. I not getting what it wants. I this, I that. He this to me. It's always in reference to I. All the conversations in our head, it's always in reference to I. So we have to sort it out. So this is where even just doing this first part of Mahamudra or simply watching your breath for 5 minutes, effectively the same. A good result of just this is that you're stepping back. You're kind of anchoring yourself to one thing in order not to run off here and there like, following every thought. That's why you hold on to one thing for, to stabilize, And then the benefit from that, and we don't think it's a benefit, but it is you start to hear the thoughts and you're shocked. They've always been there, we just haven't noticed. So that's always a major first step, to hear them. And the next one is to imbue that observing with intelligence. And here we're using Buddha's analysis, so it's up to us to learn it. And then we have some tools then to know how to work with all those crazy roommates inside our head, argue with them, notice them, listen to them, and then counteract them with other concepts. very straightforward. And it's massive work. So don't wait till the serious things happen. Start with the small ones. Train yourself. It's training, I tell you. Buddha is a cognitive therapist. That's why cognitive behavioral therapist, I think it's called that. Cognitive behavioral therapist. By changing your thoughts, you change yourself in your life. That's what Buddha's saying. But the other practice that comes before all of this, which we don't pay attention to, is control the body and speech, control the servants of the mind. 90% of our problems with other people would be solved if we could control the mouth. Some people can. They've got good discipline. That's wonderful. But control the mouth. Don't vomit out the words. And our trouble is, if we're not paying attention, and we're not, or haven't been in our lives, you know, I never knew I was angry until the words came out my mouth. Instantaneously, they came out my mouth. I had no time to look here. Some people, it boils up and then vomits out, you know. So controlling, pouring all our mental energy into controlling the speech is a very good first practice. At least you don't do the damage and you don't damage yourself. Then we have the luxury to see the mind, the thoughts. So with Lama's technique, back to Mahamudra, 20 to 1. We've gone past time already. What time is lunch? Oh, okay. Okay, fine. So with Lama's technique, okay, he brings us next. As Lama says, meditating on the mind is not Mahamudra, but it leads to it. Okay, just have Lama's words. So using our own mind as the object of concentration is a unique characteristic of Mahamudra meditation that makes it such a powerful method for eliminating our dualistic thinking. However, contemplating our own consciousness does not bring the actual realization of Mahamudra. So when they use, okay, let's look at the word Mahamudra. Okay, this is confusing to us. Let's look at the word Mahamudra before we go further. Okay. It literally translates as great seal. And all it's referring to, that word is referring to the word emptiness. And that word is shorthand for how things don't exist at the deepest level, which is that they're empty of inherent existence. And we're going to discuss all this. Okay, we're going to talk about it. So Mahamudra is referring to that. That's all. And Sanskrit. I don't even, as I said before, I don't know the translation. Dzogchen is another technique similar, but it's not the same as Mahamudra. So because the point about the Mahamudra one is in the second mode, when we combine it with this first bit, and we'll do that probably this afternoon or tomorrow, that's where you begin to get the realization of how there is no intrinsic self or mind. But we'll go into all that. That takes time. So because mind is clean, clear in its nature, we can cut through the busyness of conceptuality, cut the gross dualistic thoughts, and begin to experience the clarity of our consciousness. Which really just means the mind being not so conceptual, chatty, agitated. And that could take time. Eventually, we unify the indestructible concentration, when you've got it, you know, 6, 7, 8 stages of it, gained in calm abiding meditation on this clarity with a subtle wisdom that analyzes the dualistic view, which leads to special insight, the realization of ultimate reality. So of course, all these words, and we haven't heard them before, it's just gobbledygook, I understand. So like anything, if you want to start with a theory, you have to understand the words. That's why even looking at the mind, if we don't understand properly the meaning of the word's attachment, the meaning of the word anger, we can't go further. So we have to put together dualistic, non-dualistic, insight, realization, ultimate reality, emptiness, Mahamudra. All these words have meaning. Like as soon as you start talking about IT for computers, I'm lost because I don't know the names and I don't know the definitions, so I can't talk it. But what happens is because we hear these words and we haven't learned them, we think, oh, I can't realize emptiness. I can't realize. No. I've been trying for 45 years to realize emptiness and I can't do it. And I'll say to you, well, what's the definition? What is it? Oh, I don't know. Well, then, of course, you can't realize it if you don't know what it is. So we're going to know the words first. In any body of knowledge, just like that. You hear a musician talking about the musical theory, it's just talking rubbish until you know what they're talking about. So don't mystify words, you have to learn them. So eventually, yeah. So this is the nucleus of the great yogi Lama Tsongkhapa's method for developing Mahamudra. In short, we start with concentrating on our own mind, and then we meditate on emptiness. So we'll go into that. So Lama talks a bit here about different ways of seeing your mind, you know, in this way we're discussing. First, he talks about the obstacles in concentration and meditation. Like I said, one is the mind always agitated, which is attachment energy, never chat, can't stop, berserk, you know. Major obstacle. So you've got to really, that's why it's a mistake to think you've got to push it away. You can't, you'll go mad. It's not a question of wishing the thoughts would go away. It's not a question of thinking that's the job to be done, to make them go away. No. You're not focusing on doing that job. What you're focusing on is doing another job, which is focusing on the mind. So while you're focusing on the mind, the thoughts will do what they have to do. But if you keep pushing and fighting with them, you go nuts. So thinking that you're sitting there meditating to get concentration, thinking you're supposed to push your thoughts away, thinking that they're meant to go away, you will go nuts. It's not that. It's you deciding you're going to stay watching, if it's the breath one, the breath, or the thoughts. So even this is why it's more tricky with this one, because it's the thoughts that are busy, it's the thoughts that are chatting. So you're going to focus on them. Just stay there without analysis, without resistance, without involving in them, without sinking into them. It's more subtle, it's more hard than just watching the breath. It's sort of like that you're in a room full of people and they're all screaming and shouting and yelling, and you're trying to hear what the person next to you is saying. You don't shout and yell, "Be quiet, you people." Mind your own business. Let them talk. You focus on what that person is saying. And the more you focus, they will disappear into the distance. If you get distracted, you can't hear what they're saying. So you're focusing on being firm on just watching the breath, just watching the thoughts, and the shouting and yelling, you know, will take care of itself. It's like you're exercising, you're becoming strong. We're usually all over the place like pillar to post, weak and dragged from pillar to post. We're trying to stay strong, building up this firmness, this discipline in our mind to be in charge of what we want to think about. The other extreme is you just go to sleep, you know, which of course, as soon as you close your eyes, it's immediate, isn't it? So and Lama says too, that as you get more concentration, the big danger is confusing what they call subtle dullness with concentration. It can be very subtle, but there's a kind of a feeling of dull, there's sinking. It's a big mistake because concentration is sharp and clear, still and clear. So I like to think of it this way. Think about it. There's two main extreme obstacles in the mind. Either way, either the mind is very dull, sleepy, or the mind's agitated. So in a sense, what you're trying to cultivate, a concentration that's more subtle, is you're trying to retain so when a person's fairly kind of bit sort of dull, even in their personality, they're fairly kind of quiet, aren't they? But so this can be the feeling of kind of being kind of quiet when you're dull in your meditation. That's good. The quiet is good. We want to retain the quiet without the dull. And with the excitement mode, you can see yourself when you're wide awake and wound up in your daily life. Mind busy, but you're channeling it. You're using the energy. There's a sharpness. There's a clarity there. So when you're meditating, the excitement is sharp, but it's berserk, out of control. So you want to keep the sharpness and not the berserk, and mix it with the quiet, but not the dull. This is the way I'm trying to say it, because we can see that psychologically. You want a mind that's, when you get concentration, that's radiant, sharp, clear, crystal clear, and utterly peaceful. And the bonus is it will also be radiantly blissful. That's how they talk. The biggest danger for some people is some people can, due to past meditation, I think, they experience a very joyful state of mind. They're very blissful. They can literally experience bliss, have the mind super blissful, super delicious. Some people, you know, can experience that, which is amazing. But if you haven't got enough practice and you don't know what you're doing, you can just become it's like you can become a junkie for that blissful feelings, you know. And that's just, you might as well just go and be a junkie. It's completely not spiritual. Pleasant feelings aren't spiritual activity. Pleasant feelings are a bonus that come if you're doing the job properly. But you've got to do it with the right motive, have it, the reason to meditate is to want to develop your qualities, get renunciation of delusions, and get bodhicitta and be of benefit to others. And if you're firmly stable in your virtue, then you can handle the bliss. If you get the bliss easily and you're not stable with your virtue and your goodness and your compassion and you wish to help others and your renunciation, you'll be in trouble. I mean, how unlucky you get some bliss. I'm waiting still, you know. So just as well I haven't had any, I suppose. Just as well. Next life, maybe. What time is it? We can finish soon. It's 10:02. I know it's early. We have to have 1:15, do we? Because of the cafe. What? Oh, about lunchtime. We have to wait for 1:15 for the schedule downstairs, do we? Okay. Okay, good. All right. So as Lama says a few things in here about how to meditate on your mind. What he says, just a few things he says. So he says no need to clean your mind. We have this very strong idea that sort of all the deluded thoughts have to go away, you know, because they're dirty. Our mind somehow is dirty. So maybe, you know, he says, we usually think our mind is bad. We have to make it clean. But it's not like that, he says. You don't need to make effort to make your mind this way or that. You just need to leave it alone. This is in this particular practice. You're trying to leave your thoughts alone. I think our impulse, and this is because of attachment in daily life, we're obsessed. This attachment is always there, always wanting things to be nice, always wanting things to be the way I want them. It's always there. So as soon as you meet a problem, we find fault, we criticize, and we think it should be something different. You know, so here, and even in daily life, it's a good practice. Just mind your own business. Just leave it alone. When we go out in a day and we go to the traffic and we go to the people, go to the city, we spend our entire day having opinions about everybody, don't we? We think we have to have an opinion about every single thing, everything in the planet, every person. It's completely exhausting. So like the thing, like she said, leave the thoughts alone. You know, just leave it there. That's a good practice. So here with the mind, just let your thoughts be. It's hard to see that. It's hard to get that objectivity. Because all the time, attachment wants everything to be lovely. All the time, attachment makes us feel I'm not enough, dissatisfied. So all the time when we hear our negative thoughts, at the same time, we're having all this negative commentary about ourselves. So it's like a vicious circle, you know? So to be able just to observe the thoughts and step enough back and attempt not to have an opinion is pretty intense. Let the thoughts be. Just let them be. Don't dive into them. We're so entangled. You know? It's an incredible practice. That's what you try to do in this first mode. Just watch them. Not analyze, not say there's anger, there's jealousy. No, not even that. Not even that. Just watch. Stay stable in watching. Focus. As Lama says. Also, no expectations. So don't have any expectation, any hope for high realizations. I remember one person who's been doing, I think Zen or something. I have to remember he told me 25 years meditating, and he was in tears saying, I'm still waiting for a realization, you know, like he was frantic, desperately every session, hoping this will be the day he'll get a realization. You go mad. You completely go mad, you know. That's a major component of attachment. This emotional hunger, you know, expectation. You'll be exhausted. Lama says, even avoid positive thoughts, you know. Lama says, avoid all concepts, even positive ones, such as how wonderful if all sentient beings can be reaching Buddhahood. No. Even if you have a memory of your past life as some Himalayan yogi, leave it there. Let go. And Lama Yeshe says, Lama says, let the mind, don't have, just observe whatever's there. No opinion. And you're trying to get, the aim of this isn't to be nihilistic, like it doesn't matter. Now, this particular technique, the point of it is we're trying to get the mind to become stable in concentration on the mind. It's a very specific quality. It's a very specific object. It's got a very specific function to focus on the mind. The Lama says some things like, your consciousness is like the sun. Just like the sun's rays shoot out from the sun, our thoughts, our views manifest from our consciousness. Whatever thought you experience, keep your mindfulness of it. Like space, your mind is like space. When the rain comes, the space is not disturbed. Rain falls, but still it's part of space. When the rain is strong, it's disturbing. But when it stops, things become quiet and peaceful again. So the rainfall is similar to all your superstitions. It's the word they use, actually. You see, a superstition is believing in something that's not true, isn't it? Well, that's what attachment is. It believes in the divine cake that'll make me happy. It believes the boyfriend is perfect and he's going to make me happy. They're exaggeration, they're distortions, they're superstitions. It's a shocking concept, but it's very true. Like space, yeah. The rainfall is similar to your superstitions. When they're all manifesting, it's disturbing, but they still have this non-dual character, these thoughts, you know. Your mind is like the ocean, like the blue ocean. It's there, you just watch it. Your thoughts are like the waves. Waves manifest from the ocean, but they're still part of the ocean. When a wave rises out of the ocean, there's some turbulence. When it drops back into the ocean, it's not different from the ocean, is it? Your consciousness is like the full moon. On this earth, all the people and fishes and chickens and trees, all the organic things are moving, functioning, but the full moon is just there. Your intensive awareness remains intensive awareness of consciousness, even though the distractions themselves are coming and going. So it's a bit like, you know, the first impulse we have is we hear a bunch of shouting outside, let's say, trying to get to sleep. The first thing we hear is all the shouting, and then instantaneously we get angry because we're attached to silence. So the job is, if you can do nothing else, if you can't change them, if you can't all ask them to go, you've got no choice but to change the way you respond to them. It's very interesting. I mean, I've got ringing in my ears. I tell people this. I'm a big saint. It's only little ringing, but it's still ringing in my ears, okay? And people know it's very distressing having ringing. I went to the audiologist and she asked different questions. She said, do you feel like you're imprisoned by it sometimes? I did. I'd wake up at night and all you can hear is the ringing in your ears and you panic because you can't stop it, you know? So I have to get out of bed, turn the lights on, and go to my computer to distract myself. I mean, mine can't, I know it's not as bad as some people's, from what I hear from people. Anyway, I knew I didn't have a choice. So what I had to practice doing, two things. In general, one was to call it good, instead of resisting it, having aversion to it, panicking, you know. I had to call it a good sound. But the other one was, as well, is to, this is exactly the point, stop paying attention to it. Stop paying attention to it. So it's there. So it's now there. It's there all the time, there. But it's working. So I don't get stressed now. It's always there. I sometimes think, God, if I be careful, it might suddenly come and get nervous again. So I'll get nervous, you know. But every day I'm practicing seeing it as a good sound instead of resisting it. And then now it's sort of in the back of my mind. It's there. It's always there. I can hear it right now, chatting away, you know. So it's a good practice. So trying to, it's this one of watching the mind and all the agitated thoughts, and that's during the day as well. A practice, what I'm talking about, is to, not the agitated thoughts, sorry, or the noises. That's the noises, for example, just noises, like noise, you know, noise. And you want quiet. Change the way we hear it. So that's what patience is. Patience isn't hoping it'll go away. Patience is welcoming it. If you can change it, yes, but so that's what I'm doing with my ears, welcoming the sound instead of resistance. Because what causes mental pain isn't the noise, it's the resistance, which is aversion, which is frustration, which is anger. That causes the pain, that causes the tension. So welcoming it is the practice of patience, which means labeling it differently. That's the job. So here in meditation, the thoughts are there. So instead of expecting them to go away, expecting a nice experience, that's just so anxious ridden, you know, anxiety ridden, you know. You just simply pay attention to whatever's there. No opinion, no wanting it to go away, no wishing it wasn't there, no thinking it should be something else, no analysis, no involvement in it, just watching. And that watching is what stabilizes you. It's a good practice anyway. Our daily life, we should be doing this. Sort of up and down like a yo-yo, pulled from pillar to post by all the craziness of the world, because we don't believe we have any control. You know? Just learn to let go. When you reach the point where you can experience the clarity of your consciousness, which is quite subtle, you know, then just let go. Keep your concentration a little loose rather than exerting tremendous effort. Don't squeeze your mind. Too much effort, too strict discipline is not good. You need to learn to let go. Keep your mindfulness continuous and experience the clarity. When the mind is stable, let go. In this state, you experience quiet, joy. Yeah. Yeah. So, any questions before lunch? Nothing? Yes. Okay, darling, yes.
So I'm just trying to work out what's going on in my head. If I'm walking around and I'm doing something, then I can see thoughts coming and going, and then I can work with them to a degree. But if I sit here and go, right, I'm going to look at my mind on a cushion, it's like they all hide.
They what?
The thoughts all hide.
No, that's the feeling. I know. The first feeling that is that exactly.
And then I can't work out, exactly, am I making up thoughts, exactly, or are they coming?
Right. I know exactly.
That's right. My
just
question.
Persevere. Just keep going.
Or just keep doing
it. Keep going. Just keep going. Just keep going. That's all. I know. It's very curious. What else? Yeah. Good, darling.
Yeah. This is going back a little bit.
Closer to the mic, sweetie.
Hello.
Good. Yep, go.
It's going back a little bit to what Chris's question was.
Yes, good.
So I can have like a skilled emotion come up, and I know what to do with them. I've got the tools, and I know from experience that when I do it, they dissipate. They just can't sustain themselves. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I'll find myself like, I don't want to.
You don't want?
I don't want to do the techniques. Exactly, like I kind of want to.
No, exactly.
Even though I don't want to be in that horrible state or whatnot.
Right. Yeah.
I won't do what needs to be done.
That's right. Exactly. So the question is?
Why?
Attachment. we're stubborn and hold on to, you know, like little children. We're
Right.
stubborn. Don't you take this away from me, stubborn. Even though it's just attachment instinct is to hold on.
Right.
And sort of, yeah, it's an attachment to getting what, it's attachment to what I want. And habit, just deep, just habits. Just
Thank you.
So try and laugh at it and tell them to shut up or something. You understand? You've got to be very tricky, very skillful. So Cyril has a question. Yes, Cyril. And so does Leonie. Cyril, talk to me.
Yes, I was wondering about just observing the thoughts. So the afflictions are wrong concepts, but if we just observe without applying any antidotes, can't we just recognize it's wrong and it can heal the mind?
Yeah, that's another practice, Cyril.
Ah.
Of course, that's the job in daily life. This job is not that. This job is to get concentration. That's not the job in this particular technique, is not to distinguish the difference between the good and the bad thoughts. The practice here is to simply concentrate on whatever is there. There are many different techniques with different purposes. It's not as if you do that all the time. There's one technique and it's to help us get concentration.
Okay.
Do you understand me?
Yes, but I was wondering if just concentration alone on the mind has no healing power.
No what? But that's not the point either. So what do you mean? What you see, your question is implying that each technique somehow should give you everything. There's made up of hundreds of techniques. Each has got their own purpose. So the reason to get concentration, Cyril, is so that your mind can go to a more subtle level. So you can then go to the second mode of meditation and get insight into emptiness, Cyril. That's the point of it. Concentration on its own is useless. Chatting on its own is no good. Everything on its own, they're all dependent arising. There's very specific purpose for all of these things.
Okay.
You just got concentration. Yes, if you followed the system of concentration and got to the subtlest level, you would think that you've already become liberated. The bliss is unbelievable. The clarity is unbelievable, but you've got more work to do. And so we have to combine it with this second mode of meditation and start to realize the emptiness of the self and the emptiness of the mind. That's the only reason you need concentration is that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Leanne.
Oh, hiya, thank you for the teachings, Venerable.
Oh, darling.
My question is all attachment negative?
So you have to give me your definition first, because obviously you've got a different definition from the Buddha, and that's very common. So tell me, roughly speaking, what you think it is.
So, for instance, I am attached to people not hurting other people. And it's not really in a way that I do initially get upset about it, but because I have some understanding of karma, I kind of understand that people have the experience that they're supposed to have. I try and detach a bit, not to get too involved. But I don't know, I suppose it's kind of a motivation for Buddhism for me.
Okay, good, okay. So why do you want to call that attachment? Why don't you say, I have a very strong wish that people don't harm each other? That is a totally valid statement. You don't have to, attachment is neurotic and emotional and kind of grasping and ridiculous, but you can have a pure, valid, compassion-based wish, may people not harm each other. It doesn't have to be what you call attachment. And if it's attachment that's needy and manipulative, and then you get upset if they do harm each other, that's because of attachment. That's not because of compassion. But if you have valid compassion for others, it would never upset you. You wouldn't get angry or hurt. You just have even more compassion. So it's a difference between attached, neurotic, needy wish for something and a clear, valid, compassion-based wish for something.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I understand.
Thank you. Very good, darling. And in fact, this is a really important point. In fact, Leonie, this is a very tricky point, actually. That's why we suffer. You see, if you see two people harming each other, this is a very important point. You're going to have, first you'll have compassion, won't you? And compassion is, oh my God, look at those people harming each other. This is terrible. That's compassion, darling. Do you understand that? And then that's valid. But what happens is, if we also got attachment, which is this needy, emotional hunger that everything be lovely, and then when they fight, that's upsetting your apple cart, and that's why you get upset. That's not compassion. Compassion is right next to it. That's valid and reasonable, but attachment's self-centered. So we mix the attachment to me getting what I like, which happens to be nobody up fighting, with compassion for two people fighting. They're different states of mind. It's a really important point to understand.
Yeah, I used to just, jump right in and try and stop it and
that's right,
get
yes.
involved. But
Because
now I just sit back and.
That's right. So if you don't have attachment, you'd have more wisdom and you'd be more clear, and you would know more reasonably what to do, and you won't lose the plot. And sometimes you can't stop suffering, and then you won't get depressed about it. You'll just renew your own bodhicitta and think, I must never give up. It's very, very different.
Great. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So in other words, we don't suffer because people suffer. We suffer because our attachment can't cope with it, and then we get upset and angry or depressed. That's why we suffer. It's a very fine point, I tell you. We don't get that in our culture. In other words, you don't suffer because you stub your toe. Well, you do. There's some pain there. We suffer because we're angry about it, and it shouldn't have happened. I don't suffer because of me in my ears. I suffer because I have anger about it and fear and anxiety, which is reasonable because we're all the same, but we can learn to work with it. That's the point. And I know that with people working with pain in the medical profession, that's how they're talking, There's ways of interpreting it that are different that help you live with the pain better instead of resistance and freaking out, because that's what causes so much suffering, the resistance. You understand? And that's aversion. There's a very fine difference between these states of mind. It's very fascinating. What else, people? Anything else there, Chrissy? Yes, sweetheart. Talk to me. Yes.
Hello.
Yes. Hello there.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. Right. Going back, it's more of an open-ended question, possibly, to Chrissy's and the lady in front of me, her question about, let's say, disturbing emotions and trying to control them.
Yeah.
Is there ever any case, or maybe because this trying to control one's emotions, trying to control one's emotions, it's a work in progress.
Yes,
you're never going to get
exactly.
there. So is there ever a case possibly for, let's say, allowing oneself a bit of self-compassion and maybe indulging in some emotions, maybe so to speak?
No, I understand. I think, if the emotion is so strong and you can't handle it, then find a safe environment in which either it's a good friend or go to your therapist and cry and weep and cry and weep. But the reason to do it isn't just to get it worse, it's the reason is to work with it. So we have to be reasonable. I mean, this is an extreme example. It's a very funny one, but it's an extreme example. It's a heavy one. My friend Sunny in prison, who I always use as an example of this terrible environment. She was accused of murder, lived in isolation for years, was totally innocent. Husband got executed for this murder he never did. His brains burst into flame. She's in isolation for years and years after years after years. And she said, I knew I had to take responsibility for what was in my own mind. So she worked on her own mind. She did yoga. She had her own methods because she knew she didn't want to go crazy. But she said, I'd give myself 5 minutes to have scream and rage uncontrollably. And then she'd stop and she'd start her work again. Years and years of work. So that's an extreme example, but a really good one.
So to park it maybe in some ways, to paraphrase it, you could park some emotions and then come back to them later when you feel a bit stronger.
It's up to what you have to know you need. Don't be scared of it. Suppression isn't the point. We only have 2 modes in our culture: suppress and deny or vomit. This is a whole third one. It's working with what's then. Even or another example, let's say you say your partner's cheated on you and you're full of pain and grief and anger. So there's 2 options. You come to me as your friend. You can either be raging, angry and blame and criticize. He's evil, she's evil, she did this, meaning make your anger worse. And I'll just agree with you. Or you come and because you've got to have a friend to help you work it through their very different experiences. So having angry thoughts doesn't mean you're being angry. It's just old vomit from the past. And this stuff just rises up. That's not being angry. Then you can not be scared of it, but look at it, work with it, be in tears, but believing in it and increasing it. That's the difference. We have to know the difference. It's not to be scared of our minds, you know. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Be very real, and know we can learn. Don't be scared of it. We think being a good girl means I'm never going to be angry again. That's fantasy. You walk around pretending to be peaceful. There's nothing worse.
Sure.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
It's
Thanks.
rubbish, you know. Time for lunch, I think. John, yes. Who's next? Hello, sweetheart. Good. Yes.
Right. So linked to a few of the points that we've mentioned, one thing that I struggle with is when I'm having conversations with friends and they are complaining or upset or about X has happened, or it might be something that just keeps coming up for them. And I really want to almost guide them to reflect inwards about that and to kind of, in a way, not that I know lots, but to educate about how they can help themselves. But at the same time, and I do try and do that with certain people, but you judge it. At the same time, you don't want to feel like you're lecturing, and at the same time, they just want you to go, oh yeah, no, that's really annoying. You know, they want you to feel it. But at the same, I don't want to. I can kind of like play it, but it's not right for me either or people will try and get a reaction, an emotional response from you.
That's all the time. People want that very much. So that's where you've got to be very skillful and know this person. Do you want to be in that conversation at this moment? I mean, you've got to know. You've got to make decisions every single minute. If this conversation is going to go on for an hour and a half, you better leave, baby, well before the hour and a half.
Yeah.
So you've got a sense of whether this is a worthwhile conversation. If it's your dearest friend in the world, then that's different. If it's a passing person, and most people just vomit out whatever they feel because they don't ever feel anybody listens to them. So it's still got to be clear. You don't have to give lecture. Don't have to sit there passively. You maybe just have to, I've got to go. You've got to decide how to respond. Stay, be there, respond this way, respond that way. Every minute you've got to try to be doing what is wisest. Because a compassion, as Dalai Lama says, is never enough. You've got to have wisdom, and that you have to learn slowly. Do you see my point? You're already doing that. Just keep doing that.
Okay.
Are there situations in which you really think this person's, I mean, is it strangers do that to you, or is it just your friends, or what?
I feel like I can detach easily with strangers because I can.
Do strangers also do this?
Probably.
What
I
do you
think.
mean probably?
Well, yeah, I think people do. A lot of people do. I guess
In what situation
offload
would it be?
onto me. Well, I'm thinking about one of my very good friends who I'm always there for, and she constantly has arguments with her mum. Very, very emotional arguments. And I do empathize with her because she feels very badly about these situations that keep arising.
She doesn't know she's not doing anything about it though.
No, and her expectations of the situation don't change, yet the emotions keep coming up for her.
Exactly.
She's not she's got to, if she can't change the situation.
So what do you do with it, or how do you help her?
Well, I let her speak. I let her speak and I let her get her emotions out, and I listen and I empathize with her.
So this goes for half an hour, 5 minutes?
Oh, hours.
Oh, darling,
throughout life.
But how can you think that's useful?
Well, I don't. Well, I mean, it's useful for her at the stage she's at, is it?
Why do you think that's useful? No, it's not. It's increasing her misery.
Do you think?
What do you mean, do I think? Of course it is. What do you think? She's always only blaming her mother. She's only thinking her mothers are wrong. She never thinks she's got a problem.
Yeah.
Everything's about her mother. She runs back like a little, moth to a flame because she's not working on her own mind. Sweetheart, it'll never change until something she starts to change.
Yeah, so well, exactly.
You say she's your friend. Why is she your friend then? I mean, what kind of friend is she? I'm not trying to be rude. You've got to choose your friends, honey. I mean, do you ever have conversations other than this?
Oh, yeah. She's got a really good sense of humor.
And you have other conversations?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not just all like this, but I feel like I want to help her.
I know,
but
how do you help her?
Well, I do try and plant seeds along the way.
Maybe more than plant seeds.
Should I?
I mean, if she really trusts and loves you, does she really love you and trust you? Does she really love you and trust you?
She does.
Be a little bit bloody well braver then.
Yeah.
Do you think she's capable of hearing advice?
That's the thing. I don't think she's capable of that.
Her own mind
not at this stage. Not at this stage.
How long have you known her?
4 years.
And she's not capable still. Do you think? Are you? Maybe we've all got attachment to being seen as a good girl, and maybe you're afraid of upsetting her.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a big one. Yeah, that's
definitely
definitely
a major one for you to look at. Forget about solving her problem. How about you looking at that one?
Yeah. Okay. No,
you're
that's
afraid to say anything that she might dislike you for.
Yeah. Well,
so you're trying
that
to
is a big one.
You're being a good girl with her.
Yeah.
I think forget her problem, please. Look at your own problem.
Focus on that.
All right, do you understand?
Cool. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Time for lunch. I think so. Yeah, time for, I know what you people are having, but we're going to have lunch. So see you in, what was it? The plan is 2:30 today, is now 1:15. So, okay, and I think that's, so have a bit of that time. Yeah, okay, we're going to sit here, I think, and people are going to, I want you to have your lunch, but if you can make it useful, 3 or 4 of you, and talk about this stuff. Talk about the weather as well if you want, or the football, I don't care. But it'd be nicer to talk about this stuff. Then it makes it lunch and discussion group. All right? Is that okay? If you don't want to, then be silent. There's 2 options. Talk about this stuff or be silent. That's the best way to put it. That's part of the retreat, okay? And make a decision. Make a decision. Do you understand? That's what I'd like. So you